And we're live.
All right, everybody. Welcome to RAGIN with. We've got a special guest this evening, Mitch Rogers, and we're going to be talking about his creative journey. We are simulcasting to IndieVolt, Comics and More New Jersey, Geek Insider, as well as RAGIN AVC. Hit the button, share this out with your friends, and also take a look at the show descriptions because we have links where you can find Mitch's project, The Bogre, Southern Gothic, and we will be talking about that and the creative process right after this.
Raging.
Howdy, howdy, everybody. Make sure that you hit the share button and subscribe to wherever it is that you're tuning in from. I'm going to drop the card here so that we can say hello. Hi, Mitch.
Hello, how's it going?
Doing well, doing well. We're going to dive right into this.
All right.
I want to know about your creative journey. What in the world possessed young Mitch to get into comic books?
Well, I've ever since the first time I ever read Calvin and Hobbes, I've been into comics. What made me want to do comics was probably sounds cliche from a '90s kid was Todd McFarlane's Spawn. You know, the idea that someone can do it, by himself. Although he didn't do it by himself for long, but just that concept. I was like, oh, I can create my own stuff, and then I started reading more and more of the indie, books, because I found like Mike Mignola's Hellboy, Sam Keith's The Max, and all that stuff in the 90s.
Oh, shit.
Obviously Ninja Turtles also. I was a huge Ninja Turtles fan. And then when I, found out they were based on a comic book that only two guys did, that really set me off on a journey of wanting to do my own comics.
Mm-hmm.
And I eventually got my first comic out in 2009, summer of 2009, after going to college, dropping out of college, getting a day job, and then just saying, you know what, I'll just go ahead and and start now and doing it. And it's been 12, I guess, going on 13 years since.
Yeah, I mean, doing it from 2009 onward.
Yeah.
Having been on this journey myself, it's one of the hardest things that I've ever done. And there are
Yeah.
a lot of misconceptions with people who've never studied the industry or aren't part of it. They're like, "Oh, it's just pictures and words. It's cartoons. It's this and that. It's for kids." It's really not.
No.
So
No,
what
it's
is your
not.
yeah, I mean, do you have opinions on that? Like, what would you say to
Well,
some of those people?
well, I I I got out of the kid stuff pretty quick. It was about middle school and stuff. I started watching, the the big movies like Godfather,
Mhm.
Scarface. I had an uncle who was a film buff, and that's what got me into like the more non kid stuff. And for comics, I was into superheroes, growing up into kid stuff, but mostly I was into the more mature stuff, not necessarily like, quote unquote porn comics, because people
Mhm.
always bring that up when I, talk about, normies, not comic book people,
Yeah.
but, the normies out there like, oh, you read, the naughty, no, it was more like Neil Gaiman's Sandman,
Oh my God, I love this
the
guy.
Vertigo stuff. In high school, I discovered the underground stuff, which
Yes.
really, hit me on, which really got me excited because it wasn't just, typical, guy or, guy or girl, you know, finding a bad guy or whatever. They were character driven. There were usually multiple storylines going on at the same time, which I've always found interesting. I've always loved great storytelling along with art. And when people ask me, like I would get into comics, but I'm just not into superheroes. So if I always ask them, what's your favorite genre of film or novel? Because there's going to be at least 5 titles that were done that are great in that subgenre, genre or subgenre. Because it was making comics. You always, if you're not talking to a fellow comic book fan or creator, you always get, oh, what's your superhero's name? What are his powers? What are his villains like? What's his secret identity? And I'm always like, I don't do superheroes. I'm a horror guy. My main character and everything's a monster. Like, oh, I wouldn't let my kids read that. I'm like, I hope you don't.
I didn't write it for your children. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's I mean, you can, but
that's
I
the thing. People see comic books and they're like, oh, it's for kids. It's like, no, there's so much more that's out there. I mean, the all ages, I understand, is it's a hard sell for any genre. For any I would say publishing endeavor that you're doing too, children's books, very competitive, but with comic books too, it's like there's a lot more that's for your middle grade and adult, and really a lot more, like you were saying, the underground stuff, where there's just some of it, a lot of it's not safe for work, definitely for adults, and then you have to, as a parent, really, there are some that walk a fine line between like, okay, maybe my teenager isn't really old enough for this kind of content, but certainly it's not all superheroes.
And I kind of find it funny that a lot of the people that, nowadays, seem to say like, oh, comics are just superheroes or kid stuff and nothing else, seem to read manga, which is basically comic books. Essentially they're words and pictures told in sequence that tell a story. And there's science fiction, there's horror thriller, there's romance, there's all the genres that are in American comics. It's just for some reason American comics are stereotyped as just for kids, this one genre. And same with European comics. When I was a teenager, I discovered Heavy Metal magazine and got into Richard Corbin and Mobius, and I can never pronounce his name right. I'm probably going to butcher it. Philippe Juliet, the guy that draws on the huge pieces of paper. Who else? Von Baudet, of course. The standards, Crumb, Spiegelman, and all that. But in the 90s, reading comics in the underground scene specifically, you had like Daniel Klaus and Peter Bagg, that kind of took the underground aesthetic but brought it into the 90s and beyond, because those guys are still doing books, obviously.
Right.
And I'm sorry, but I lost my train of thought.
That's okay. No, I love hearing about the influences and stuff like that, because that's certainly, having gone through your campaign, certainly a reflection of the type of stories that you do. So tell me a little bit about your writing process then. Have you started off with prose and kind of worked into comic book scripts, or what was your process in that sense?
It was actually the other way around. I started doing comics even before I broke in. I was always doing comics, since being a kid, and then I got into doing prose like in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Primarily just because there were some stories that I had in my head that I couldn't tell visually, or I didn't think would work visually. That would work in a prose setting more. But I do start with like an outline when I'm writing my stories. This chapter, this happens, this happens. Then I actually write it out. It's easier for me as a prose type story. Then I convert that into, page 1, panel 1, and so forth. I do a lot of planning. At least I try to. Because I'm one of those guys that has to have everything down pat in everything in my head on paper before I move to the next step. Which is the illustrating and inking and all that.
One of the first things when I was kind of stepping into this realm of comic books was approaching people and saying, "Hey, I have a story. Where do I go from here? Like, what does a standard script look like?" And everybody had a different answer. I mean, there is no standard. So, what was it like for you when you were doing this kind of like in the early 2000s? Internet's really not as prevalent, probably not as much information as there is now. Like, how did you kind of muddle your way through?
Well, I got a lot of knowledge on how to do comics from things like Wizard Magazine. As kind of controversial, modern audiences have about that. They did have a lot of like instructional articles on like how to write a page, how to tell a story, and these types of panels work for suspense or action over these types. And also just talking to people, building a network of people that either knew how to do it or wanted to do it but didn't know how, because you can find like knowledge and stuff just by bouncing around ideas. Like, oh, this worked for me, why don't you try it? Or I see this works for you, how can I do it, type stuff.
That must have been like when you go back and think about your earlier works and stuff like that. Are there a lot of cringe moments where you're like, oh my God?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I was so ahead of my, or I was so full of myself, let's say that. Like, even when I did my first graphic novel, which was the first Bogre story, like I was collecting it into one volume, and then I was just looking back at it. I was like, oh my God, why did I do that? Why did I have that character say that? And I ended up redoing a lot of it, because I got done over the span of 5 years. And so much has changed from the first issue to the last issue, both storytelling, my art style, and so forth, that I was just like, I can't have this all in one book. So the first book I ended up doing completely redoing completely from scratch, and just, tweaking some stuff that I just did not like. I had this bizarre style that I thought was good at the time, and it wasn't.
What was that style like? I gotta know.
It was probably a cross between really it was basically a poor imitation of Sam Keith meets Ted McKeever, but done very, very poorly. I could draw better at the time, but for some stupid reason, I thought that was, oh yeah, that looks awesome. And then looking back, I was like, it doesn't look awesome. And even now, after I got the, what I call the extended version of the first Bogre story, I still look back and I'm like, I could have done better in other parts, but the book's already been printed, so so I'm not going to spend years just redoing the same thing over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
It's also fun for me to see like where some people were at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, where they were later, and I was like, oh, if something that bad can become something that good, then I can deal with having some of my worst, stuff out there for people to see.
I think it's kind of cool too, because people will see the progression in your storytelling, in your art, and everything like that. So, being that, okay, so you are the artist and the writer for your stories, then. Do you think of your stories more with like the artist brain or the writer brain?
It depends on the part of the process I'm on.
Mhm.
Obviously, when I'm writing it out excuse me, I try to think visually, because I'm doing it visually, so I know what to go by. But then when I'm illustrating it, sometimes I will, the sort of storytelling part of my brain will kind of take over and go, what I have written here might work better if I do it this way. If I put this panel in front of this one instead of behind it, it makes more sense. I'm one of those people that thinks that there's no part of the creative process that or I'm trying to put this in words. Sorry.
Mhm.
I'm one of those guys that like I have 100 thoughts. I'm trying to put them into verbal stuff. There's no part of the creative process where you shouldn't be creative. In my opinion, like you could be done, it's lettered and everything, and you're about to send it off to the printer, and an idea comes in your head. I think there's just as much reason to do it as if that idea came at the beginning of the process.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you limit yourself in that way, then your stuff starts to be limited. And then you start messing up and start telling bad stories or drawing bad panels or
Mm-hmm.
like I'm one of those people that, be as creative as you can whenever you can.
Because I was going to say with both the writer and the artist brain, they do function very differently. It's like that split personality within you, and so because you do it all, does it ever feel like you're battling or with which way to go, how to keep yourself organized, and maybe because you're doing it all, it might not be as specific on your script. Like if we looked at your script, would it be chicken scratch? Would it be like, oh, like you're looking at it going, yeah, I don't know what I wrote there.
Well, because my writing's so bad, I do have to type it out before I start illustrating it. Because I have run into that before I started typing them out and printing them. I would have like something written down, and I'm like, "What does that say? What is that?"
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so look at it, turn it upside down,
Right.
try to.
What is this chicken scratch?
Yeah,
I do that
Yeah.
all the time. I have notes, post-it notes everywhere. And it's like, what the hell? And I'll even have some that say urgent, and I can read urgent, but nothing else. It's like, fuck me, man.
yeah. Don't forget this. And it's like,
Right. It's like,
What is that?
oh, yeah, what is that? What does that go to? So, when it comes to like your cheating tools and things like that, I know Nita loves her, index cards and things like that. We have sticky notes like crazy. I've got like so many notebooks, and there's like notes of all the things in all the books. So it's not like one dedicated book. How do you kind of keep yourself organized? Because there are a lot of people who, especially the creatives, who are really scattered like that. How do you kind of bring that all in so that you can focus?
Well, one trick I've learned is keep all your notebooks that go to the same thing together. Because before I got that down pat, I would look through notebooks because I'm one of those guys that has to take notes and has to know what I'm going to do before I do it. Write the characters, like who they are, what they like, because that can add to the story.
Mm-hmm.
And there was times when I was just first starting out where, I would, look at notes for one book, and then I would, pick up, the next notebook, and I'm looking, and it's something completely different. I can't remember what book that went to.
Here, just to give you an example, I've got the one notebook, and you see, like, I have different sticky notes for different things, and then it's like paper clips and folded notes and stuff like that. And every once in a while, I just have to go through every single one of them and figure out, okay, what can go, what can stay, what gets a new sticky. Yeah. It's kind of insane.
Yeah, I'm one of those guys that just writes it all on paper, on the paper. I'll have like a whole full written page, and then there will be an arrow going to here, and you have to turn the page around, and here's like a whole paragraph I want to insert on. It's crazy. I'm a crazy person.
Aren't we all? Aren't we all? So when you're putting your words together, there are a lot of people. So we recently spoke to somebody, and he doesn't throw out a thing, not a word, not a phrase, nothing like that. And then there are other people who are just like, no, that's crap. And, they throw it out and it's gone. I know for me personally, I love my first draft usually because I can work with it. And then sometimes it just disappears. Something happens, your computer crashes or whatever. And it's like, it's devastating.
Fire, throw it away.
Right. So, but sometimes it's devastating because you're like, I had that phrase just right, and you can never recreate it again. Not like that, so you struggle. How do you overcome things like that when you lose some of your words or some of those ideas? Maybe something just kind of blows up and you're like, damn. Have you ever had to start from scratch on something?
Fortunately, no, because I have so many notes.
Okay.
Like, I might have lost one change that I did from, one form of, to another, but I keep so many notes that, I may forget, what goes where, but I don't think I've lost much.
Mm-hmm.
I've never, again, like, usually if, say I lose the computer file, I have the last draft that was handwritten that I can just, start, start a new draft from there and, and just go.
And that is the benefit of longhand, Meredith. You know how you used to make fun of me for writing in longhand all the time? The very first time I wrote a story without using a notebook, my computer crashed, dude, and I lost like almost 10,000 fucking words.
Oh, you hexed yourself.
No, you hexed me. You're the one who said typing would be faster.
It's my fault. I take the blame. I got big shoulders. I can take it. So when it comes to stories, then, Mitch, what does that look like? Is it for me personally? Like, I've woken up in the middle of the night with dialogue running through my head just over and over, and I'm like, all right, I'm up. I'll write this down. Sometimes it's a title, and I'm like, that's a great title, and just from that, a story will be birthed. So, what is your storytelling like? Where does that come from, and how does your muse speak to you?
It, like, where ideas come from, or is that what you're asking?
Whether it's ideas, or has it been just a word, a title, a sentence?
It can be anything. There's no, like I said earlier, that there's, I don't think there's no spot where you can't be creative. There's no spot where ideas can't pop up. Like, in most of my ideas, specifically for the Bogre stories, come from non-horror elements, or non-horror stuff. Like, Southern Gothic is heavily influenced by. It was kind of a weird combo. To Kill a Mockingbird and Andy Griffith.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
What?
Yeah.
Yes. All right, we want to get into your brain for that. Yeah. How in the world did that happen?
It just came to me one day. I think I was either watching the movie or or watching the movie being To Kill a Mockingbird or watching Andy Griffin, I was like, you know what? It would be cool for like this type of setting for this to happen. And then that became Southern Gothic. I have another story that I wrote, a prose story that was published in a Friends magazine 2 years ago, I think, called Elizabeth. Started from, or it popped from, an argument I had back in college with a friend of mine. You know, it's where the idea kind of stuck. I wrote some notes, you know, later on found them and developed a story. You know, I've had story ideas by listening to music, by just driving somewhere. You know, I'll see something on the side of the road, you know, and I'll get an idea from there. I mean, there's no telling. And I don't think of many people that I know of personally who are creative that have like this set way of coming up with ideas. There's the old Harlan Ellison joke. He would say, you know, when I would ask him where his ideas come from, he'd, you know, say the joke, Schenectady. You know, like, what's that? He goes, this idea service in Schenectady. I, you know, send them some money and they send me ideas. And there's always well, he said there's always someone that asks for the address. But yeah, there's no telling. You know, ideas find me more than I find ideas.
I love that you said that. No, I totally get that. I'm just like, because there are some days where I'm like, where are you? Where are my words? Come back.
Yeah. Yeah, very rarely I'll get an idea if I just sit down with a notepad or a sketchbook. You know, usually it's somewhere else. I guess it's because the mind's relaxing.
Right. Yeah, the worst thing is a blank page for me. That is like the worst thing. It's like, oh, now I got to fill it, you know, damn. But I think you're right. When we're busy, you know, it's just our imagination goes, our tasks, our lists and everything else. And we're working through that. And all of a sudden it's just like, oh, I could probably expand on that. And then now, being that you do horror, how many of these characters have you written are based on people in your life? Because I know for me, there's a lot of bloodletting in my head.
Meredith.
What?
That's sacred, dude. Don't blurt that.
Like, if your friends picked up your book, they'd be like, dude, why'd you, yeah, dude.
That I've tried to stay away from because I could see that happening. Like, I write a friend into a book. And and you know, they're like, hey, why'd you have this happen to me? And it's like, oh. Yeah. So I learned that, you know, even before I started doing comics, like, you know, publishing and stuff, I learned that fast not to include people, you know. Also because, like, if you have any, like, when I was in elementary school, you know, if I decided to base a character on, say, a bully I had or something, that would probably affect my opinion of them worse. You know, because I know some people that will base, you know, like bullies or, you know, a bad teacher they hated, they would base a character on. And again, you could tell that it might have not have started when they started writing it, but definitely when they were done with it, they really, really hated that person, you know. And I don't like that. I don't like, you know, feeling that way. I will base characters on, like, historical people or just people that I hear about. That's easier for me, I guess, emotionally, you know, because I'm not, you know, taking out any rage on anybody or something. Because you know, some days I have a lot of rage. You know,
I say it's totally therapeutic. Totally therapeutic. It's like the bloodletting. It's like they just change the names to protect the innocent.
Yeah. But what about the disclaimer at the beginning of your books? No identification with actual persons, living or deceased, places, buildings, and products is intended or should be inferred.
So there you go. Plausible deniability.
Oh my
not a lot of
God.
people read that. I know, just because you put a disclaimer on something doesn't mean people will read it.
Shh. It's okay. It's okay. I do. For me, it's very therapeutic. You know, it's like, oh, okay, yeah. Now you're on my list.
Yeah, fuck you, Travis. I'm sliding your throat tonight.
Slade in the next book. We are at the 30-minute mark. We're going to take a quick break. Let me find your card here. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. This is episode 50 with Mitch Rogers. We're going to be right back after this break.
This is the Legend of the Traveling TARDIS. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Subscribe to us wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Also catch us on the HWWS Web TV YouTube channel. Subscribe today and become part of the legend.
All right, everybody, for a 10% discount on your Gemini mailers, make sure that you go over to GeminiComicSupply.com and use coupon code VOLT10, VOLT10. That's right, you can save 10% on your Gemini mailers. Use that coupon code VOLT10. That is courtesy of IndieVolt. Thank you to Varian Grant. We've also got a little bump here. It's only got maybe a little over 2 days left on the campaign. That is Build the Bull. We'll be right back after this. All right, and we are back. We are raging with Mitch Rogers. He's got the Bogre Southern Gothic right now on IndieGoGo. He's got 45 days left of his campaign with a flexible goal. And if you are tuning in, make sure that you check out the show notes because we've got the links to his social media as well as his IndieGoGo link. And some of our sponsors are there as well. So make sure that you use those links, especially that coupon code. Save some money. Hi, Mitch.
Hello.
So the Bogre, you said this is a story that you've been working on for a while now.
Well, the character I've been working on for a while. I started Southern Gothic, which is the second official story in the loosely connected series back in 2015 or 16. I can't remember. Started off as a 4-issue miniseries, and now I'm collecting it into one volume, adding some extra story or some extra features in it, some some extra scenes and stuff to kind of smooth out the story. Yeah.
Well, so we are going to bring up your campaign in just a minute, but I want to ask you about some of these other things that that I see here. The Flesh and Blood collection. What is that?
That's basically kind of like a collective term for my non-Bogre work. Every once in a while I'll put out one issue of something that will have short stories, either prose or comics. Eventually when I get enough of them to feel like one volume, I'll put out one trade of it. And I have I have tons of stories that I've either done or want to do that don't fit within the larger narrative of the Bogre series. So I kind of tongue-in-cheekly came up with the Flesh and Blood collection, as a way to kind of market my non-Bogre work, like I said.
Well, sure. I mean, we as creators, it's really hard to stay with one idea, one character. I mean, there are some creators where we've talked to them and they're like, oh yeah, I've got 100 books in mind for this, and then to what you were saying with this collection, that's more my speed. I love writing these little flash fiction pieces and seeing if I can kind of hammer them out into scripts. That's kind of where I am, and then even expanding them into like a single floppy or standalone, or maybe even eventually collecting them into this piece. How far into that are you, and when do you think we might see something from that?
Trying to think. I'm at least half, if not 3/4, done with what could be one volume.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I kind of do them when I can.
Right.
Obviously, since the Bogre is my main thing, I kind of, if I don't, if I'm not working on like one storyline, I'll work on the other, or I'll take time off. I'll do a little bit of the Bogre here, a little bit of something else there, and I actually have a magazine, like a fanzine type, that I print off from Kinko's, where I as like a way to keep material coming out, called Midnight Theater, and that kind of has basically both Bogre and Flesh and Blood collection stuff in it each issue. Like there's always like one Bogre story and one other story. I'm trying to keep it like that, for the time being, just so I can get stuff out and get rid of all the ideas in my head that aren't out yet.
Is it easier for you to kind of work solo, or have you thought about kind of taking some of these shorter stories and maybe trying to find an anthology that it would find a nice home in?
I've thought about that. When I started out, some of my shorter stuff I did kind of send out. That was back in 2009, so there wasn't much outlets for that. I may try to do it at some point, but I'm kind of such a control freak about my own stuff, and it was kind of hard for me to work with someone. There's nothing wrong with it. I understand, if someone has an anthology, and they're putting their, or they're putting stuff in it. But it's, I guess as my personality, I just, have like a no, what's the word? Like no negotiation. I can't strive away from what I want to do.
Right.
With my own stuff.
Nita, we don't know anything about that, do we?
Oh no, we were just rejected, period, for an anthology because we won't bow. Suck it.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with people who are willing to change stories or characters to fit, someone else's like anthology, or if someone else is publishing them. It's just, I know what I put into everything, and it's kind of hard for me to negotiate that, or to negotiate is probably not the right word. I can't like let this go to keep this, or whatnot. If the words that are coming out of my mouth are,
I got you, Mitch. Okay. I got you. This is my ball. This is my playground. And I'll play what I want to play.
Sometimes I ramble, so I don't know if I hit the point or not.
No, I totally get that, because it's really hard to share that sometimes, or let your baby go, because at the end of the day, you want to put out a quality thing. Kind of going solo is difficult and lonely as that can be sometimes. At least that you've made all the decisions.
In one story about that, I mentioned my earlier story, Elizabeth, that my friend published in his magazine. We had a long discussion after it was published because he changed the ending.
Oh.
Yeah. Now, I understand. I've known him since college, so it's not like he stabbed me in the back. Like, he thought he was helping because he thought it was a better ending, but it's one of those things where the ending kind of is what the story was about to me. So to change that to me takes away the whole point of the story. So I was like, yeah, if you want me to do anything else, don't do that, please.
Right.
Or at least ask me beforehand.
Right. Like there's a reason behind that, you know. Yeah. And wow. Yeah, I think I'd probably rage. Slade in the next story.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he's one of my best friends, and I know he wasn't trying to like do me wrong. It's just, you know, yeah, it's the ending was the whole point of the story.
Right, right. And that's so important. I mean, most of the time, you know, as writers, we know what that ending is. We know what that looks like, you know, and then you get the beginning, and then the struggle is well, for me, the struggle is like getting the middle, you know, figure out point A to point C. Like, what does B look like? So we are going to bring up your campaign in a second. We do have some people who are tuning in. Thank you guys for tuning in live. Michaela Jade's been here. I know she gets up god awful early. Sarah's here. We've got Conry as well. Dragon Multimedia LLC. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you share this out with your friends. We've got the Bogre, Southern Gothic here. And so the sequel to The Cult Hit the Bogre joins Sheriff Hank Tate as he searches for the killer, Mr. Crow. So before we kind of, I'll scroll through here because you've got some really good images of your interiors and things like that. Kind of go back and tell us a little bit about that, the history where this came from. Was it one particular character that you're developing into this kind of series? Because this is book 2 then.
Yeah.
So I'm going to assume that you've got more coming after this.
Yeah.
What is your central character? What's the kind of the common thread that's going to carry us through?
Well, each installment's a standalone story.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, but the only prevailing thread throughout the whole series is the Bogre himself. He's essentially this immortal being, kind of like a sorry, my dog's wanting in my lap. He's kind of called the Father of Vengeance, or by some people in the story. Yes, thanks, champ. Thank you. He wants to be. Yeah, he wants to be on camera too.
We love pets too. That's okay.
Yeah, or the God of Vengeance by some people. He's one of those beings that, like, you want revenge against someone, you summon him, and then he takes care of whatever you want. So each story deals with revenge of some sort, or someone doing something bad that you think they should pay for. And there's later on this whole like overarching thing with like other monsters and so forth. The first graphic novel was basically him fighting organized crime. I wrote it when I was in high school, so it's kind of bare bones. I didn't release it until 2009, but the second story is basically a murder mystery. Do you want me to discuss the story itself?
Oh, I would love for yeah, so people have an idea what this is. And I love the fact that they are standalones.
Yeah, because when I created it, it was like pre-internet. It was 2009. Well, I created it back in 2003 when I was in high school. I didn't, I just kind of wrote the first one over that span of time, and that was in the days when indie stuff was very hard to find.
Right.
So I thought it would, wouldn't it be cool to kind of take, the concept of like, Sandman and stuff like that, where you had the basic centric character, but each story was standalone. Obviously Sandman, there's, stuff that happens that throughout the series that transfers over, but if it'll get to the point where I do enough of them and it was just hard for people to find them. At that time, like I said, it was before the internet. then they wouldn't feel like they were missing out if they bought like one volume or one book from it.
Right.
That's why like a lot of my stuff that I'm working on now after Southern Gothic is just like short stories until I do the next like long form one.
Mm-hmm.
But Southern Gothic centers primarily around Sheriff Hank Tate. He is as a kid he saw a man being lynched, so it traumatized him, it haunts him. So to kind of make up for it, or to kind of his own way of dealing with it, he becomes the town sheriff, the town sheriff of his hometown.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's the town sheriff, dealing with typical small town stuff, and then there's killings going around town of where someone's killing entire families, and he calls himself Mr. Crow, and he's a religious fanatic. Like he thinks he's taking out like sin and filth and all this stuff. That's not really a statement on religion. I just thought that was a cool thing for a villain. I mean, not cool,
yeah.
but an interesting take on a villain. Because in reality, those kind of people just do horrible stuff.
Sure.
And of course, if I'm going to justify, a monster killing people, then that's probably the route to go. And then all of a sudden, there's this separate series of killings that happens where prominent citizens or former prominent citizens, some of them around town, start dying, and there's these stories of this red-eyed monster appearing around town. So he's trying to find the killers in both situations, and as he's investigating both cases, he learns that they're not only connected to each other, they're connected to that incident that he saw in the past. So he finally, in his own mind, gets to have some kind of closure with, as a child, seeing the worst thing that could happen to a person.
Have any of your characters, when you were developing them, have they ever kind of frightened you or maybe surprised you and went, wow, that went darker than I expected?
No, my imagination's pretty dark already, that I don't think there's anything that can really surprise me
Mm-hmm.
in that aspect. I mean, I usually all my writing's pretty dark anyway, so yeah, I'm not really scared by my own stuff, I guess, because I know it's going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
or I know what happens, and I know how other characters are going to deal with it. So yeah, that's probably the best answer I can come up with.
So when it comes to things like that, then because you said that you know what's happening. Have you ever maybe tried to push yourself and go, I wonder if I could make this even darker? Like, how twisted can this go?
I usually don't try to do shock for shock value.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't do stories dark just to make them dark. I do them dark because that's kind of the types of stories I've always liked. I guess I'm a messed up person. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I've always loved horror movies. I've always loved, like suspense stuff. I love ghost stories, and they're all dark. I don't know what it is about them that draws me to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I must be messed up, but yeah, but like everything that happens, yeah, but like everything that happens either has something to do with the story or a character.
Mm-hmm.
And I never try to do shock or dark for shock or dark value's sake. Now, the first Bogre story, I did a few things like that, and when I was redoing it, I took them out, because I just thought they were, it was me being an edgy teenager thinking, or it was me as a teenager thinking I was being edgy. And I was just being, pretentious and whatever you call it.
And we are, for anybody who's tuning in, we are scrolling through the images here, and I love that that you said it's not just for shock value, because I can't even tell you how many times you see these terrible things on the news, documentaries and things like that, and there is truth behind, like, that truth is stranger than fiction sometimes. And it's just sometimes grabbing onto a story and making it your own, putting your words to it, and putting the different emotions and stuff to it. So when it comes to this series, then, because now you told us that you're kind of the Bogre is kind of your main book and your main series, and then you're working on your collection and things like that. Do you think, like, really far in advance, like, where am I going to go with this? How many books are going to be in this before I put it to rest? Or is it something that you think you're going to be working on for the foreseeable future?
I always have multiple ideas in advance. So as far as I know, I'm probably going to work on this on both the Bogre and Flesh and Blood just for as long as I can, because I have so many ideas that I get a few ideas strapped down, then more ideas come. It's just that's just the way it is. Being creative is, if you have ideas and you don't use them, then it's kind of like they have to get out somehow. The only way to get them out is to do them, is to put them out there. So, I mean, I have so many Bogre stories lined up. I have so many Flesh and Blood stories lined up. I have a few other, like, long-running comics I have ideas for that for some reason I can't recall. It's probably too late for me to think hard about it.
Sarah asks a good question here. Are there any searches on your devices that would make an eyebrow rise if authorities were to browse your history?
No.
I'm going to
Oh,
jail.
really?
Well,
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure I'm on a soft watch list, because I tell my microphone every once in a while, I'm writing fiction. I'm just doing research.
And I'm always like, mind your fucking business, Steve.
I mean, I wouldn't think that they would, like, raise an eyebrow. Maybe they would think I'm messed up, but no, I don't. Now, to be honest, some of my rantings and ravings in other areas, they might, but but as far as, like, stuff, hidden stuff on my computer, I'm fine. They might look into some kind of some kind of therapy for me or something, but no, I mean,
I might be slightly offended if I wasn't on some kind of a watch list. That's all I'm going to say about that.
After the past couple of weeks, I've been
like
totally
I said,
offended and concerned for what they consider flags.
Right.
Oh yeah. Oh, don't get me started on that rabbit hole. I said, I'm probably, they probably raise an eyebrow for other things not related to my comic book stuff.
So as long as nobody's missing in town, you're good.
Yeah. Well, funny story about that. Oh my God. Back in 2016, I've always said that, just joking with friends, that if they ever hear stories about a psychotic, crazy clown running around town, that it would be me. Not too long after I made that joke, the 2016 clown sighting started.
Oh no!
Oh, beautiful.
In my hometown of Greenville, South Carolina.
Oh no!
Yeah.
That's spooky.
I had a lot of people texting and calling. Was like, "Are you sure that's not you? I'm sure it's you." I'm like, "No, I don't know. I don't go around kids and act like that. No."
Oh my God!
That was a joke. I wasn't serious about it.
Yikes!
Yeah, so I never make jokes like that again.
Yeah, because because you never know. Truth is stranger than fiction. I'm telling you.
Yeah, it's like I could understand if it was like in Atlanta or
Right?
New York or something. No, it started in where I live, where I was born, Greenville, South Carolina. I had
Wow.
people from all over that know me. So you're the one going around scaring kids, right? You know, I'm like, no, God,
No, it was me. Oh my
This is
gosh.
South Carolina. You don't do that. You get shot.
Right? It's the same in Florida. I'm sure it's the same in Louisiana too, right, Nita? Tell me about the Bogre, though. Is this is it like a real monster? Is it a phantom? Is the Bogre going to show up in different areas, or do you kind of keep it in the South?
He shows up in different areas. The first graphic novel was just a generic city. I didn't really base it on anything. The second one is obviously in the South. The short story I did in between those two, that will be in, I guess, the third book that I release, took place in Europe during World War II. The next actual story I'm doing after Southern Gothic takes place in feudal Japan. He's all over. You know.
Oh wow.
Yeah, any place anyone wants to summon him, you know, he pops up. Just because that, from a creative standpoint, I like escapism a lot, and in having stories set in different time periods and different places, I have just as much fun as the reader would. But yeah, he's flesh and blood once he's excuse me, once he's summoned, but when he's not, he's kind of in this like limbo area. I'm big into the paranormal. So when I created the Bogre, I kind of, based him on, based his, the way he is on like my own beliefs regarding it. Like he exists in the real world when he's summoned. So he has to like eat and sleep, just like a living entity, but he's immortal. So you can't kill him. Because he's essentially a god in flesh form. But then when he's not summoned and he's kind of in, I guess, the spirit world, he's essentially a spirit. And I've stories playing in the future where he can actually influence or talk to people in the real world using it's whole like phantasmal. If I can come up with the right word. I get tongue-tied a lot, if you haven't noticed.
You're doing great. Well, I think that's kind of brilliant for storytelling because you're not limiting yourself to any one location or even time period. So as a creative writer, for me, that's very appealing because there are a lot of times where I might get lost in research and things like that when it comes to storytelling, or if I'm writing a longer story. But this kind of gives you that creative license to time jump.
Yeah. I love history. And, whenever I come up with a different Bogre story, I always try to look at like what time period, what place or country or continent I can set it in, just because I like I said, I love history. So, if I can tell a story, using that, then I'll jump on it because I love listening to stories just as much as I love writing them. And, so I always love hearing about historical events and like famous people, like what they did. Like, I don't know if you know about Alan Shepard, the first American in space. He wet his pants before he went up. So the first American in space had pee on him.
I love that story. I mean, because
Google that if you don't know it.
Well, better pee than brown spot in yourself. That's all I have to say. Yeah. And maybe there was that too, but we haven't heard that story yet.
Like I love hearing, about that stuff. And Yeah. Of course, knowing a lot about history, when you watch the news, you're like, this has been done before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It also makes you, enjoy life. It also makes you scared of it when you see it happening again.
Yeah.
But anyway, this isn't time or place for that.
Well, we are speaking with Mitch Rogers. He's got a campaign right now on IndieGoGo, the Bogre, Southern Gothic. We are at the end of our hour. You've got 45 days left, flexible goal. Hopefully this helps you move the needle a little bit by getting to know you and your story and more about the Bogre and what's to come, which I think is really interesting. I love the fact that that there is that creative license to kind of hop around the different time periods and things like that. That makes it interesting, and it allows you to kind of hit on those areas of interest. Like you were saying, World War II. There's so much history, and I guess nowadays even folklore, because a lot of those many of the veterans from that era are gone now.
Yeah.
And so we are kind of the storytellers behind that. And wherever else you take the Bogre is going to be really cool. So one final question before we get going. If you were going to give a brand new creator, whether it's for writing, art, or comic books, if you were going to give them one piece of advice, what would that be?
Do it.
Do it.
I hear at cons, I always hear advice, or I always hear people asking for advice.
Mm-hmm.
And there's 1,000 reasons not to do it. There's only one reason to do it, and that's more important than the 1,000 reasons not to. I had parents that always told me, if you don't try, you may fail, but if you don't try, you'll never know.
Yeah. Failing's easy.
Yeah.
Failing is very easy, but trying it and doing it, that is a cut above a lot of other people.
Yeah. Especially nowadays with the internet, there's no reason to not do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, you may fail, but you won't know unless you try.
Yep. And on that note, you guys, we have been raging with Mitch Rogers. The Bogre Southern Gothic is on IndieGoGo right now. Make sure that you head over there and give it some love. If you've already backed it, thank you. If not, share it out with your friends. Support it if you can. We appreciate you. Mitch, it's been a pleasure. Hey, Nita.
Yo.
Final words.
Throw my dudes.
We're out of here, you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Hit the subscribe button.
Thanks for having me.
Hit the button, you guys.
Yes.
Hit it. Do it now.
Do it.
Bye. Hey there, this is Meredith Loughran with RAGIN, and I wanted to let you know that we encourage and promote independent creators and their projects through organic interaction, consultations, and more. Visit Nita and me at RAGINAVC.com for details and contact information.